All right, a very good evening to you. My name is Joe Ageo, and this is Kivumbi 2017. Our continuing coverage of this year's general election is now just about 6 days since the election itself, and just a few days, 3 or so, since that declaration. That has caused interesting developments in the country, and we are going to be discussing those ones in a moment. And I'm just going to introduce my panel here, and no strange faces on KTN News. Daisy Amdan, women rights activist.
Yes.
I hope I got that title right. All right, Dr. Alex Awiti from the East Africa Institute at the Aga Khan University, and Barack Muluka, communications consultant, publisher, and a lot of other things, including a dreamer. He likes to say that.
Dreams.
So, okay, great. So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Kivumbi 2017.
Thank you.
And I think we're going to start this with the State of the Nation, as you can imagine, and President Uhuru Kenyatta earlier today coming out since that declaration was made on Friday night. And he said some things that I want us to discuss. But first, let's listen to what the president had to say earlier today.
But I truly believe that there is no single Kenyan anywhere who wants to continue to see violence, looting, and demonstrations that end up destroying property. But if, like I said, there are those who are aggrieved and feel that they are not willing to accept, there are also constitutionally laid down procedures that they can use to be able to express their dissatisfaction while allowing the many millions of Kenyans who wish to continue with their normal life to do so.
Barack Muluka, your sentiments on what the president had to say today?
I think he's largely spot on. I've heard him talk about the need for resumption of normalcy. He has talked against looting, he has talked against demonstrations, and he's talked against violence. But I've not heard him talk against killing, because there have been killings. And much as we may want to bury our heads in the sand, the reality is out there, and the citizens know. He needs to reassure people that they are safe. And
at least he said you can go out there and protest if you want, but just make sure it's
the police will not also be rioting, because there's a sense in which the police also begin rioting. And I think that if I saw what was happening before we tragically lost Nkaiseri and Dr. Matiang'i took over, there's been a certain kind of gleefulness and some kind of spoiling almost for action. People within the state establishment stating things like, we have got certain apparatus which we have not even tested, and we would crave the opportunity to test them. I'm not the one saying that. They have said, and I'm quoting them verbatim.
All right. Dr. Awiti, who do you think the president was speaking to this morning?
Well, first, I'm not sure. I think his body language sends very mixed signals. I'm someone who kind of likes to look at people, the context, and what they say. His body language was a little wanting, in the sense that it did not reflect the solemnity and the seriousness of the situation that the country faces today. He seems to be business as usual, but it is not business as usual. I understand that the Jubilee side is jubilant, they're celebrating, but there is half of the country that has grievances. And I think his coming today should have been more presidential than he was today. He should have been scripted. There should be a proper lectern before him, and he should have spoken directly and with feeling to the country, to calm the nerves of the country. So I'm not sure that he was speaking to... I think that message, in my view, could have been to Jubilee supporters. And of course, telling Raila Odinga and his folks to go to the courts, which is what they should do. And asking the police, as Barack has said, to exercise restraint. I think that's not exactly what we wanted to hear. There have been killings, and there have been studious denials by Dr. Matiang'i and his colleagues at the Interior. And I think all of these things fly in the face of evidence that the citizens themselves have collected, that have been shared very widely in social media and some of the mainstream media, including outside people who have been reporting on these issues.
But isn't there a place also for the president to sort of project the image that it's time for us to move on as a country, that we can't dwell here forever?
But there is a different way to do that. I think Uhuru must now remember that if we are to move on from this election, he is president-elect and he is the current sitting president. He needs to get out of that bravado of the campaign trail and begin to reassure the public that he is in charge, that he is the president of all Kenyans, not just the Jubilee wing of the country.
Daisy, bravado, is that what you also saw there?
What I saw is a bit of insensitivity. I would have also expected that the president would also speak to those people or to the people the families who've lost loved ones during these skirmishes, and expressed his commiserations and also reached out to draw people in. He's right. Everybody actually wants a return to what we love to call normalcy. We do want to go back to our day-to-day activities, but we also realize that there is a huge section of the citizenry that is very aggrieved by the outcome. And while indeed that there will always be winners and losers, I think the president owes it to Kenyans and even to himself and to the legacy that he spoke of on the day that he was declared the winner of the presidential election, where he actually said that, you know, he's reaching out to even those who didn't vote for him and that we are one people, one country. I would have expected to see more of that. And also speaking to the security agencies to exercise restraint, because never mind the denials, we know the Kenyan National Commission on Human Rights, which is a state organ, a commission, a constitutional commission, has already talked of 24 Kenyans who've lost their lives.
Which the police disputes quite a bit.
The police may dispute it, but this is a government commission, a state commission that is saying they have the evidence of that there are 24 people who've died, Kenyan citizens. Those are 24 families that have lost their loved ones, and excessive use of force by the police.
But the truth, ladies and
I
gentlemen,
think it's important that the president, even as he reaches out to Kenyans to go back to work, and you know those who are aggrieved to seek judicial means, it's important that he speaks to those who are hurting and gives those assurances. We really do want to see that.
But are those people really willing to even see the president or even listen to him? I mean, if you look at the state of the country as we speak right now, there's a lot of bitterness on both sides, quite frankly, out of that campaign. And perhaps there are people who may not even hear what the president is saying. What more really can he do? I mean, he reached out an olive branch on Friday night, and there are still people who've been protesting there.
And it is their right.
The opposition leader says, well, don't go to work. So don't you think the president can also be frustrated, like, what more can I do?
No. You know, one of the roles of being a leader is being able to innovate within those challenges, you know? It cannot be that he is as helpless as every other citizen. Mm-hmm. And while it is well within the rights of people to protest, the president is right when he says that they must do it within the confines of the law. Because 101 on human rights is when you're exercising your rights, when it begins to infringe on my rights, then we must, you know, find middle ground. And that's what he's saying. He's saying, look, you're well within your rights to protest, but please let those who are willing to go back to work and, you know, to move on, let them move on. We can't be held hostage by, you know, those who are aggrieved. Remember that there are those who are celebrating this outcome. Mm-hmm. So, and in any election, we have winners and we have losers. That's why the law actually creates avenues for people who are aggrieved to then seek redress elsewhere.
And we'll speak about the legal options in a few moments. But Barack, the president also talked about the athletics team in London. He congratulated them, and he chose that to be part of his very brief speech on the steps of Harambee House.
Yes, I think the performance of the Kenyan team in London has taken the back burner. It is something that we would ordinarily be going to the rooftops with, because Kenya was actually number 2 in the ranking, and this is a world event. It's a good thing. Good thing that does not nonetheless disguise the reality within which we are operating. And I would not begrudge the president really the right to feel good about his victory. We have seen him campaigning very vigorously across the country, and we were told by the pollsters from the very outset that this was a very tight race. So his victory arrives to him with some feeling of relief, some sense of happiness, that he kind of is entitled to celebrating and feeling good about.
But is it time for us to find more things like that, maybe that make us feel good together as Kenyans? Dr. Witi,
may I just drive home my point? That nonetheless, there's the other side of it, that while his people, the Jubilee, have been celebrating with some kind of smugness, some kind of almost, I would say, some very sadistic joy in the unhappiness of those who are defeated, he should not be seen to be also participating in that sadistic happiness, because he is not just the president-elect, he is the president, and therefore the symbol of national unity. He should bring us together.
Okay, Dr. Witi.
You see, I think we've gotten to a point where we're scrambling for some good news. We're really desperate to move on, to get ahead of this process, to put the elections behind us.
There's a hashtag, Move Kenya Forward.
Yes, but you remember that this is the 6th election since 1992. And it is one of 5 of 6 elections that have been contested, that are disputed, except 2002. So Mr. Kenyatta cannot pretend that he does not understand the context in which these grievances are arising. And as Baraka said, he is the president of the Republic of Kenya, period. And we expect something close to extraordinary powers from him to rise above his own excitement about the victory that he has to suffer, that has come after a really painful and hard-fought campaign. He has to put that aside. And as Desi said, he has to throw with the 24 families that have lost their loved ones as we speak and are grieving tonight. This is not about Mr. Kenyatta and Mr. Raila. If he wants us to move on, he has to lead that process of healing the country.
Desi, I'll come to you in a moment, but I want us to look at what Raila Odinga has been up to. He was very quiet since the results were declared, and then yesterday he comes out from somewhere, goes to Kibera, and then he says people should not come to work today. I think we should just listen to that for a moment and then we'll come and discuss that.
Amesema kwanza tuambie wana Jubilee wamemwaga damu ya watu ambao hawana hatia, innocent people. Watalipa damu hiyo ya watu wote ambao hawana. Wanasema hakuna, kwa sababu wana Jubilee wameweka maaskari, wanajeshi na bunduki. Watu ovyo. Kesho usiotoke nyumbani. Kesho hakuna kazi.
Hakuna kazi. Daisy.
Well, you know, I sympathize with Right Honorable Raila Odinga. It's difficult. I think it's very difficult, especially when you anticipate a win and then you're faced with such a loss. I think that one needs also to be sensitive about the time that we're living in. Remember that the people he's speaking to depend on that work for their day-to-day livelihoods. And we already know that we have a problem, already a problem of unemployment in Kenya. And I don't think that a lot of people are going to put up with people not coming to work. And I think the best answer to him came from one of his supporters. I overheard this evening. I think it was, they were being interviewed in Eldred. And they said, how does Baba expect us to not go to work? He told us to vote. He told us to turn out in large numbers. We did. He assured us that he would protect our vote, and he didn't. So now he also needs to understand that we need to eat, and I think that's really the best.
We've done our part, so
we've
let him
done
do
our
the
part.
rest.
Let him do his part. And what is his part? His part as a leader, as a statesman, he knows that the law is very clear. He cannot hold the country hostage because he is aggrieved. There are mechanisms for him to seek redress, and he really must explore those options. But
it's been rather mysterious. I mean, he said, we are not going to the Supreme Court, but we'll tell you what we'll do, but it will be constitutional. It will not be something outside the law. That's what he
said. Even demonstrations are constitutional, but you must also, this thing can't be just about you. Okay, it must be about everybody. It must be about Kenyans. So if you want to, of course, demonstrations are designed to cause paralysis, okay? But how many people are willing to be caught up in that? And that's how you lose people. And for me, the one thing I keep looking, and I feel for Right Honorable Raila Odinga and for the support base of NASA. But at some point, he must have an exit strategy that allows him to leave the stage honorably. And we can see already from the signs that are coming from the state that if they pursue this cause in the manner that they are, it will be a dishonorable exit. And it will taint his legacy perpetually. He will go down in history as the man who couldn't accept defeat. Because remember, the minute you enter into a contest where there can only be one winner, you must be ready to also accept defeat. True, if you feel that you've been robbed of a victory or that you have lost unfairly, then you must seek redress. And for me, to say that you're not going to court, particularly when the judiciary have shown themselves to be neutral arbiters and they have had successful cases adjudicated before the courts. I think for me, those are mixed messages.
Let me bring in the gentleman here. And Barak, you've been waiting on the wings. What options, quite frankly, would you say Raila Odinga has at the moment as we speak?
First, the point that Daisy has raised is worthy of emphasizing. That Raila Odinga on the campaign trail kept telling the citizens, vote for me. You are never going to hear me saying again that my votes have been stolen, my election has been stolen. And if my election is stolen this time round, leave it to me. I will not come back to you. He kept on
Maybe
making
that is what he's doing. That I am not going to come back to you.
No.
He's telling people not to work.
He's gone back to them. He went to Kibera and issued an edict that he's not capable of enforcing. One of the things that when you are in authority, because Raila is in authority of his own kind, is that you don't issue edicts that you have no capacity to enforce. Today, people went to work. And tomorrow,
we can be sure who went, who didn't. I mean,
people went to work. I mean, this is as clear as daylight. We cannot contest it. The options that Raila Odinga has, aggrieved as he is, are to go to court. If he's not going to court, the only other option he has is to concede defeat. I expect that he probably deludes himself with the thought that he's going to invoke the sovereignty clauses and say that the Constitution talks about sovereignty. And since the institutions that have been mandated to implement the sovereignty have failed you, we are now taking the sovereignty as the people and that this is constitutional. Now that is going to completely derogate his legacy, as has been correctly pointed out. And
what
finally,
if he calls a series of rallies at Uhuru Park tomorrow, day after?
To what good end? And I think
Well, I mean,
there's
Barack, for example, would say it's going to be so chaotic in that city, I will not go. And there will be a sense of anxiety and paralysis, perhaps.
Yes, the question is, he must ask himself whether that is what the citizens want. Look, when you have about 7 million people voting for you, and about 8 million people voting for your opponent, it does not necessarily mean that the 7 million people are fanatical about you. They have just exercised a weighing activity, and they have seen that they would prefer you, but they could very well still carry on and live on with the other person. So there's no way you should delude yourself with the thought that you are going to bring 7 million, 1 million people into the streets. But finally, Joe, there's a very important point here which must be made. What we are seeing so far yesterday and up to where we are, is this NASA or is it Raila Odinga? Because there's a difference between NASA
but today,
and Raila.
A few hours ago, there was actually a tweet from Wiper Movement, which was rather cryptic, but it says, "Tomorrow we unveil the hope for Kenya, where development, rule of law, respect for human rights, peace and prosperity are the order of the day." And then a few hours later, ODM reloaded, that's one of the tweets, the accounts out there. "Our resolve remains resolute and we are steadfast in our determination." Then ANC says something else about liberation and so on and so forth, that there seems to be some sort of cryptic coordination going on out there about all these messages about what they might or might not do. Dr. Awiti, what are those options that you see out there?
Raila has had many lives, just like his father did. But I would like to suggest to him that he is on a very slippery last slope of his political life. He has not more than 2 arrows left in his quiver. He has to be extraordinarily careful.
We've said quite a few things about last bullet and even the last time.
This is the last quiver.
Now you're thinking two arrows in his quiver.
No, it's the quiver.
So this is getting tricky because he's running out of rope here. And the reason he's running out of rope is that when they first came out, and I will say this to the public very boldly, what they presented, those 50 pages of server logs were absolute crap. There was just nothing in there. It does not befit someone of Raila's status, with the resources that he had, to go and just troll the planet of trash and present that to the Kenyan people. It was completely unbelievable that they even did that. But having said that, tomorrow when he comes out, he had better convince the public that he has the evidence to actually just blow away this election. That is incontrovertible. That everybody will look and go, "Oh my God, look how they messed this country up." If he can't achieve that effect, I would advise Mr. Raila to just go home and tend his grandchildren. Because this, as Barack said, is going to go really badly, and he will just throw away everything that he has stood for the many years that he's been the bulwark of Kenya's opposition.
If you were advising him right now, what would you be telling him?
I would tell him that if he doesn't have the thing that will blow this election out
And
completely,
which he should take to court.
then he shouldn't come. If he wants to play in the public gallery first and just bedazzle and overwhelm the country with the evidence that he has and then go to court, then he should.
Well, there's only
If
4
it
days
is just
left.
political showmanship and brinksmanship, he shouldn't.
Daisy?
I agree.
You look dazed.
I am not, at this point in time, because I'm looking at those cryptic tweets. As the results were coming in, there were equally cryptic tweets telling people, just wait for it, We're going to show you guys the real numbers, And we haven't seen that yet. So unless it is really incontrovertible.
Well, they did present some results at some point and said, well, these were the real numbers. I think it was 8 million or something. Yeah.
Yes, but they didn't show us, just like the way we said some of the numbers we were not understanding coming from...
They must have had their own portal.
Yes, so where were these numbers coming from, So for me, the bottom line is this. at some point, you begin to lose people, you know? And that's what's going to happen. If tomorrow the major announcement is not something as Alex says, is going to blow the election out of the water, Raila is going to look like a sore loser. And he is going to be the master of his own
what he's been painted to be over these years? I mean, even during the campaigns.
But that's unfair. Listen. In the 90s, you know, when we were much, much younger.
Do you remember, I mean, Daisy, I'll stop you there. Remember when the president was campaigning, I think in the final week of the campaigns, he said, this guy can't be saying every day his votes have been stolen. In fact, I think he got so angry, he said, well, siataye aibe. So there's been a narrative, of course, around him already. So how worse can it get? I mean, it's already
the worst
out
it can get is you debunk. Then you, whatever it is that you put on the table must debunk that narrative that you are a sore loser. Remember that even at the advent of multipartyism, Matiba, Kibaki, remember after every election, they would always call press conferences to cry foul. The opposition was always crying foul. So we're seeing it today. So it is unfair to label Raila as a sore loser simply because he's crying foul. What cannot happen is that because you feel that you are aggrieved, you then take it upon yourself to use extrajudicial means then to air out your grievances, because there are properly laid down procedures for that. And I like what Barack has reminded us, that he said that this time around he was not going to lament the loss of his votes. So he can't be going back on his word, because at the end of the day, he is already losing his base. There are quite a few people, much as we don't want to see it. Of course, there were people who were a bit worried about, coming out to work today. But people are getting about their own business. People are already traveling back to Nairobi from upcountry. And there's a sense of people are like, you know what? Let's get on with it.
Whatever it is, let's move on. But here, I would like us to move to the next level of this conversation. And we have seen the bitterness, we've seen the animosity around our elections, and I think it was really bad. Now it's still continuing. And I want us to discuss what this says about our elections, about our politics. Is there something fundamentally wrong with how we've organized our politics, Barack, that every time we have an election, we're going to have a close election, then one side is going to win, it will be disputed, the other side will be so disappointed, and it just doesn't seem to end. It's a cycle that just keeps coming back. What's wrong with us?
Well, writing in the Standard on Saturday, I addressed a bit of that we have mismanaged our national life, our national affairs, and we have elected to define ourselves very solidly and rigidly within ethnic conclaves. And all these elections that we have gone to since the return of multi-party democracy have been basically ethnic roll calls. It doesn't matter that 2, 3, 4 communities come together against another 1, 2, 3, 4 communities, and the whole thing is hyped up. I think it's because of our kind of philosophy of government of the state, because the Kenyan state has been a felonious state. It is a predatory state. It is a state in which people go to office to eat and tell others that we are eating. In fact,
why are we just like that, or is there a fundamental reason why that's the case?
They don't pretend about it, about why they have gone into government, and they'll come and tell you, come and join us, so that you are also part of the party. Come into the gravy train. Then when you look at now the winner-take-it-all arrangement that is the new constitutional dispensation, there's a certain sense of panic among those who are left outside. They feel like people are going to eat the country and leave them outside. There is panic if you are used to being also at the center of power. And there's a sense in which you mobilize your community so that that community wants to believe, wrongly so most of the time, that it's also eating. And in that context, you'll talk about the stealing of our elections. People will call you a sole loser. The converse, there's a converse to everything. If somebody is perpetually portrayed as a sole loser, the converse is actually that on the other side, there could be also perpetual thieves. Yeah? So that as a citizen, therefore, I want to find where the balance is resting between perennial losers who are so losers, or alternatively, perennial thieves who are so adept at the act of stealing. Where is the balance? I need this to be taken to court.
Okay, Dr. Witi, is there something wrong with our politics fundamentally, or is it a problem with ourselves?
I think there is a fundamental problem with the Kenyan person.
The Kenyan person, you mean?
We are irredeemably corrupt and dishonest as a people. The prevalence of rule violation, an inclination to bribery, to corruption, to electoral fraud, these things are us. You know, you can create an institution, call it the International Electoral Commission.
Independent.
But as soon as you put a Kenyan in there, you'll get the same results as what we got in 1992, in 1997,
Yes.
in 2007, in 2013, and the contestation that now bedevils our country today. It is an inherently Kenyan problem.
But isn't
we are
it true,
deceitful
Dr.
and
Alex?
we are dishonest
No,
too.
but isn't it true that there are Kenyans who are maybe working outside the country and they're doing very well in the UK, in
well,
the US,
ones who work in
and
government, the ones who work in our public institutions, I'm sorry. And that goes back to the question of why we don't trust our public institutions. Because these are not institutions, as Barack said, these are predatory institutions. They are instruments and agents of the state. And not just the state, but of the president and his clique. They use these instruments to bludgeon everyone in this insane zero ethnic sum game that has become the hallmark of our society. That, as Barack said, the people who were sitting in there, adept at stealing, and there are guys who were waiting, baying for their blood to be let in so that they can also become hounds. So this is what we are seeing.
But Daisy, if you think about it, and later on, after we come from the break, I'll be playing some sound bites of people who are beginning to have second thoughts about voting for the presidency, you know, saying, well, maybe we should vote for other things and just leave this presidency thing, whoever has it, to continue until they're tired of it. A certain kind of desperation coming in and people becoming completely apathetic about our politics from that respect, because there are people who feel, well, you know what, my vote doesn't count anymore. I can vote for a candidate as many times as I want, but then my vote will not register.
What counts is how IBC counts.
So yes, I mean, like they said, that it's not the vote that counts, it's the people who count the vote. But I was going to come back to this issue of the Kenyan, and Barack will tell you about something Achebe said being the problem with Nigeria, that this corruption thing is so easy and so profitable that the day will make it difficult and expensive
Painful.
and painful, then maybe people will start thinking twice. Is that the same case here?
I think it is.
That everything is so easy and profitable that we just keep doing it even though it's horrible.
You see, for me, there's also a hypocrisy around us as the Kenyan people. First of all, our processes are not fair. Here we are discussing whether the electoral process, and when we're talking about the electoral process, we're basically talking about the August 8th event, which was the general election. Yet, when we look at the process in and of itself, the rules that were set, the way the legislature simply blurred the lines. They refused to be confined within, the scope of campaign financing because, they were not ready. Never mind that this law was to be in place in 2011. The political parties, the nomination exercise was absolutely shambolic. For those who lost, they talked about the shambolic nature and that they lost in this unfair fight. For those who actually managed to get through this shambolic process, said, well, we had a few challenges, but by and large, it was a good process. And we see the same replicated. So we have a problem with rule of law issues, when we have unfair processes, when we have abuse of office, misuse of state resources, blatant breaking of the law by duty bearers, and then at the end of the day we question whether our processes are fair. Of course they're not fair. But if you choose to engage in an unfair process, you can't expect at the end of the day to get a fair outcome. So that we need to have a conversation about whether we want to be confined within the law. Because we all allow for the breaking of the law in as far as it favors those people who we support. But when it is used against us, then we have a problem with it, because there is no single political party, whether under the NASA coalition or Jubilee, that carried out proper nomination exercise. The institutions supervising the IBC, the Registrar of Political Parties, none of them carry out their responsibilities. So at the end of the day, when we have this kind of shambolic outcomes, then there's always a price to pay. And sometimes one person pays a heavier price than the other. The other thing is we must then interrogate our electoral system, because it's about representation. It's not that, you see, we have a system that for me to win, you must lose. And that is the trauma that people are dealing with, that they've invested so much in this process, hoping to win, and my vote suddenly just does not count.
And that's a good place to put a pause. We are taking a short break here on Kivumbi 2017, and when we come back, we are going to talk about what next for Project Kenya. Are we still ready to go on together as one nation? That is a conversation that people have been having out there. What next for Raila Odinga? What must Uhuru Kenyatta do in the next 5 years? Join us after the break.
This is KTN News.